Hi guys.
I'm Tina Hui with Follow the Coin, and we're here today with two special guests.
I'm Jason Rosenstein. I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2011, and Andre and I are representing the OSFDA, and we're petitioning Governor Cuomo and the New York State legislation.
My name's Andre DeCastro, and we're involved with the Open Source Financial Developers Association. People might not know the acronym. And we thought it would be interesting to take another angle than many of the people are taking today, which is not only do the requests or the formal responses to the New York State Department of Financial Services, but to also make aware to our legislators here in New York what the damaging effects of the BIT license might be.
So, this is exciting. I'm really glad you guys are doing this, and we're all in New York, which is important since the BIT license is in New York. And I'm really glad you guys are here so we can talk about this from your ground level. Like, for your organization, did you guys ever think like a regulation like this would occur?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Specifically, we've started this petition, and we represent the Open Source Financial Developers Association. However, the association is much larger than we are. We've gotten their support because we all understand as members that the BIT license does a little overreach, and it's the first instance of regulation on open source software. We feel that this affects more than Bitcoin companies or altcoin companies, but in general, it affects the greater technology community. I think a lot of the technologists don't realize, because of the name of the license itself, that it isn't only specific to Bitcoin. For instance, let me give you for instance, and this is something Jason and I have spoke about extensively. If you look at Bitcoin and altcoins, they aren't defined in the license at all. So if we really look at what these alternative currencies are, they're just unique sequences of random numbers that are being generated. Well, there's many applications out there that have nothing to do with alternative currency that also do the same. And there are many companies out there who produce random sequences of numbers for reward tracking or tracking in general that would fall under this law and this regulation. Some of the largest problems, which was initially pointed out by Jason, are definitions within the BIT license itself. The definitions are very broad. Regulators like to make it very broad. And this, of course, we believe at least, affects not only New York and New York residents, not only businesses around Bitcoin and altcoin, but it affects open source and technology throughout the world. The superintendent of the New York Department of Financial Services is doing a bit of overreach here, and this is a message that we really need to send out to the greater technology community all over the country.
Right. What are some of these overreaching statutes or rules that you've pinpointed?
Yeah, so we've already had the IRS say that Bitcoin is going to be considered a property and an asset, and so now we have this redundant regulation that's going to push business out of New York State into surrounding states like New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Well, I really like that you guys are honing in on the fact that this could also not just be about Bitcoin or digital currencies per se, but this is more than just Bitcoins and digital currencies, but also more just open source and technology. The language is extremely broad. They say administer, and you're going, okay, what does administer mean? Does it mean a whole lot of other different things? And it could be anything that they say, okay, this is deemed as unlawful.
Right.
Yeah, so Bitcoin is it's an open source, something that people like to develop on top of, and that people have created other alternate currencies. And now, with this regulation, people will not be able to go in and innovate on top of this newest sector of technology in the state of New York anymore. Anyone creating their own alt currency is now, they're not going to be allowed to anymore under this regulation in this state.
Yeah, and the definitions are so broad that we know as technologists dealing with the protocol itself that there are many uses. Coin or monetary store value within the protocol itself is just one use. There are hundreds of uses, but this BIT license, as it's written, covers all of the uses, so you'd be afraid to even go into a business, right? Because now you have extreme burdens covered by the definition or the lack thereof, specific definitions in this bit license proposal as it exists today.
Right. It is frightening. And I mean, it is curious because, I mean, the existing businesses now also don't have the funds to also cover all of the, you know, transactions that they say that you need to be able to cover with this new law. I mean, who affords, you know, who can have $100,000 in the bank if they're also going to transact in such a way? Unless there's going to be banks that back them up, it just puts a huge bottleneck. And so that brings a really good question. Like, do you guys know or have an idea of how many businesses are in existence in like Bitcoin, or this that could kind of be touched by this new law or rule?
Well, we strongly feel that the law goes way beyond touching just Bitcoin businesses, right? I believe it will touch traditional businesses that already exist and innovative businesses that might choose to use the protocol because it dovetails into a lot of the things that the bit license ignorantly states that can't be done unless you have a bit license. And those costs, if they're anything close to money transmission license costs in New York, are way beyond the $100,000.
What is that looking like?
I think we're looking at upwards of $500,000 or more, depending on
it's hard to
bonding
tell.
and other things that may come. We don't know exactly because it hasn't been spelled out in the bit license proposal, but that's the problem, right? The problem is a lot of the things haven't been spelled out, and they're very, very broad.
And see, not only that, like, I mean, with the proposed bit license, businesses are going to have to hire more employees and pay more than just beyond the application fees to go through with the bit license.
And
So it's really hard to tell, like, it might be 100,000, it might be $1 million or $2 million more they're going to have to pay to support all these other employees and other, you know, regulation fees that they have to pay with the bit license.
why do you think they're overreaching so harshly, I guess? Do you see them backing down? What measures do you think that they'll like really hone in on and be firm about? Which ones do you think they might change?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it goes back to one of the points that Jason brought up earlier, which is our stance that there's been prior precedents in the United States of deeming Bitcoin and virtual currencies something. The IRS chose property. Now, the New York Department of Financial Services could have deemed it a type of money, could have deemed it property, and could have said all of the laws that exist today in fiat currencies apply to it. Now, if one is to step back and say that they need a bit license, then are we saying that there isn't enough regulation on monetary means of transmission or monetary stores of value as exists today? And if there isn't, then it would be their responsibility to revamp those laws. And if there is, why aren't we just deeming virtual currency, when used for monetary store of value and monetary transmission, covered by pre-existing laws? The IRS had precedents on that. They did exactly that. So why are they discriminating and adding a whole new layer of regulation on top of something? So should we sit back as citizens of the U.S. and residents of New York and say, but wait a minute, so does one say, that, is it pointing out that the bit license is prejudicial? Or is it pointing out that the regulations that presently exist, his own Department of Financial Services doesn't feel comfortable being able to use to exercise the law against bad actors? So I think we need to take a step back and really realize what's going on here and who is influencing these regulations.
Well, who do you think that could be?
Well, I don't want to make conjectures and say that someone is or not. I really believe that Benjamin Lawsky and his department are doing the best possible in their belief. They're being very naive and ignorant to the effects of small business in New York. I believe they mean well, right? They're not as well educated in what virtual currency is really being used for and beyond the scope of what their department is concerned with, right? And our concern is that what their department is concerned with and what this has been spelled out in the bit license goes way beyond their department and way beyond their concern. And if we look at the definition of the superintendent's job in New York, it's to promote business. Now, You have an example across the table. Myself, I went to launch eCoin Cashier, and I was subpoenaed by the New York State Department of Financial Services.
When did that happen?
This happened about 7, 8 months ago. And I was one of the few in the country that took it upon himself to get an administrative ruling from FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in the United States. They gave my small business direct authority to buy and sell Bitcoin. Now ask me, why haven't I launched the company? Well, I haven't launched the company because I noticed that a lot of my colleagues in the field chose to leave the country and do business elsewhere. Many of them went to Boston, where Massachusetts is much friendlier an environment. They have Bitcoin ATMs, right? Others left.
This went to Panama.
Right. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to sit back and promote business in New York. What did I get when I communicated to the Department of Financial Services office? Nothing but dead air. And now we look at a burdensome regulation telling me, a small businessman, that I still can't launch my business. And I'm the only one I know who has been given authority by the U.S. government, by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, to do business. And I haven't done so because I understand that federal laws and state laws are completely different.
And you're waiting for them to
Right, and he had
decide.
already subpoenaed me,
Yeah.
right? So here we go, an agency that's supposed to promote business in New York, right? You have an example of an individual who hasn't launched this business because of their actions. And that's why I'm so passionate about this petition and contacting our legislators and the governor.
Well, I saw the petition. It is on change.org. And I think you've already got 40 out of 60 responses as far as I just saw.
We're almost at 60 supporters right now.
That's great. I
Yeah.
know, every hour you're getting it. Plus also, I want you to know that in California, we're all definitely in support as well. And there's also, I know for a fact, there's a lot of different, Vancouver, New York, California, there's a bunch of people I saw at Coin Congress before I came over here. And everybody is keen to kind of revisit and also be public about some revision of the BIT license. Obviously, because right now, it would just inhibit innovation, inhibit even business growth. So,
Yeah, it's not only in New York State. I mean, other companies around the world are going to be worrisome about even dealing with businesses inside of New York State now because of this proposed BIT license.
which is challenging because it's the financial center. And so, I mean, what is it like? Like, would you guys probably see a lot more of the Bitcoin companies here and the financial institutional people that work in the finance center of the world. What are their views collectively, I guess? Have you heard what they've felt like because of the BIT license, what it's been like to start a Bitcoin company amongst like Wall Street also pushing back and the banks pushing back? What's that like?
Well, I mean, they all agree that we need some sort of regulation, but everyone in the space agrees that this is extremely harsh and extremely burdensome upon small businesses who are just starting off.
Yeah. Quite frankly, I would like to understand why our regulators don't feel that the frameworks that are in place, right, to regulate regular fiat currency can be applied to these Bitcoin companies or alternative coin companies.
But
right?
your argument also is why are you adding extra things for us to comply with?
Right. It not only does it become burdensome, but then it calls many things into question, which they aren't answering, right? It calls the regulatory framework on fiat currency into question. It calls why they've chosen to go a step above and beyond and create a whole framework separate, as if the U.S. doesn't have enough regulations, right? We're in government now complaining that, you know, we have high unemployment, there's a regulatory burden on everything, and now we're creating a new regulatory framework. I guess it guarantees regulators jobs, I know that, but what we really need is to guarantee small businessmen the ability to create business, to hire and employ, and be competitive in the space, not only in New York, but in the U.S., as we've been losing ground, not only as a state, but as a country, to other countries, as our innovative entrepreneurs leave to do business elsewhere.
Well, yes, I mean, it's going to be a challenge. How do you circumvent New York, right? And then does that mean somebody traveling into New York with Bitcoins on their mobile phone are suddenly in violation of the law? You know, just creates a huge mess, and then plus other states who are more conservative will probably follow suit in New York. And that's not great either, so.
Right, right. So I would encourage our legislators to step in, say, hey, we need more time to think about this. We understand the concerns of the small businesses in New York and what effects this will have in other states in the United States, right? And to give more time and think about this from a clear mind. Do we really need regulations? And what are we really saying about the regulatory framework that is pre-existing for fiat currencies and other forms of stored value out of New York? And I think that's the big question.
Thank you. And then can you talk about your organization very briefly? Like what does it do when you guys meet? Is there a lot of members?
Yeah, well, it's a relatively new organization of like-minded individuals who are in the open source space, and we're all technologists and developers, and we specifically are interested in open source development for financial products, right? And Bitcoin and all currencies dovetails into that very, very nicely. And the organization as a whole is concerned about the overreach of the proposed regulation.
And you guys are only in New York?
Yes. We started out of New York. We meet on Tuesdays, and we are in New York, and we do have plans of expansion, but we're primarily New York technologists and New York businessmen.
Great. Well, I mean, thank you for meeting with all of us, and I mean, it'll be great to see what you guys do with next steps with the petition. Let it keep us in the loop. We'll, definitely love to cover it and make sure we're making sure everybody is protected and safe and to be able to do business. So,
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Fantastic.
Right.
Thank you. So I think it would be great if we could speak to your audience and ask them to nicely go to.
Just go to the link below,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
you'll find the link
Do
there.
it.
Yeah, go to change.org. The petition's on there. Sign the petition. Support us.
Please
It
support.
affects everybody, and we're going to be doing much more legwork. The petition is only step one. We're going to go directly to our state legislators and the governor directly. So stay tuned for more.
Thanks, guys.
Click the link.
Click the link.
Okay.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye.